Hi everyone, welcome to this week's edition of the Bugscope. This is your host, Isa Betancourt. Hope you are enjoying spring if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, and the arrival of all sorts of different insects and critters who have been spending many months, most of them at least, not all of them, in diapause or in a slower state of development throughout the winter. So today we have a special guest. We have Ashleigh, who will be joining us today. And Ashleigh has, I'll bring her on the screen now, has her bachelor's in science in forensic science and a master's in entomology. She volunteered at the Natural History Museum of London after her master's, and then worked on Bering Beetles at Edinburgh University. The last 6 years, she's been working at the National Museums in Scotland, where she's currently an assistant curator in entomology. So welcome, Ashleigh. It's really wonderful to have you here today.
Hey, Isa. Yeah, it's great to finally be joining you on the Bugscope.
Yeah. We'll say hello to some of our guests here too as well in the comments. Hello, Jelly Belly, and Oliver, who's getting worried that you got eaten by one of your sylphids. And David Howden, hello. And Andrew, who's also in Edinburgh. And Frank.
Hello.
Yep. And hello, Pablo and Rev. Good to see you. And Lisa, welcome. Hashtag pass the haps. What's that all about? I'm not familiar with that. Hello, Chris and David Dunn and Richard. Welcome to the broadcast. Thanks for joining us today. Continue to say hi if you haven't already, so we can say hello back to you. Apollo said to come here. Great. Good to have you guys here. Yeah, so here we welcomed Ashleigh. Ashleigh and I also know each other because we're both officers for the Entomological Collections Network. Yeah, which is a theme this week, because earlier this week on Tuesday we had Oliver Keller, who's also an officer of the Entomological Collections Network. So represent.
Go ECN.
Yay! Hello, Melanie, and hello, Takara. Welcome to the broadcast. Yeah, so I guess Carrion beetles are nature's undertakers, and can you give us a little overview for people who are not familiar with what they are, and then also before we get too far into what carrion beetles are, can you tell us how you got into them, your journey to get there?
Two great questions. I also just want to say I'm really sorry if my internet is bad. If I drop out at any point, I will rejoin immediately. So carrion beetles refer to beetles in the family Sylphidae. This is a pretty small family. There's actually only 200 species or so globally. So as far as beetles go, it's a nice manageable size family. And they are all either, I can't say all actually. So the family is a little bit complicated because they aren't all true carrion beetles. So mostly the family are called carrion beetles because they are associated with dead things. They feed, and some of them breed on dead animal remains. But there are many in the family that are actually predatory, some that are phytophagous, so they feed on plant material. So there's a couple of curveballs in there. We kind of should call them carrion beetles and their allies maybe. But they're really important because they are feeding on animal remains, which means that they're cleaning up all that organic waste matter and recycling that nutrients, getting it back into the environment. So really crucial. I got into them because of my degree in forensics that you mentioned, Lisa. So I kind of thought that I wanted to be a fingerprint expert or something. We got a friend of the family whose job that was, so she took me into work one day and I just thought, this is brilliant. I also, in my teens, watched way too much CSI, so that definitely has something to do with it. Thought I would be maybe the next Gil Grissom. So during my studies in forensic science, I was introduced to forensic entomology. So this is using insects to solve crimes. And the primary use is in death investigation, so using insects to work out time since death. So my final year project was looking into that, and I put out loads of dead rabbits and monitored the insects that were coming to them for several weeks. And since then I've been hooked. So I haven't specialized, I'm not a forensic entomologist, although that's a really cool job. I was convinced to broaden my horizons and look at other insects during my master's. So I studied ladybirds for a bit. yeah, I kind of like, yeah, just broadened out, but I keep getting pulled back to them. So because it is my passion, the kind of carrion ecology, carrion beetles still are my favorite group.
Oh, thank you. There's a lot there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like the fact that you can use insects to determine time of death and things like that is such a huge and interesting topic as well. And then, I guess another question I have for you too, for some more background, is how did you get into doing museum work or collections, entomology collections
Yeah,
work?
so that was during my master's. We were guest lectured by several staff members from the Natural History Museum. So Max Barkley, who we both know quite well, he's the curator in charge of Coleoptera at the NHM. And also Erica McAllister, who is a world famous crazy fly lady who is incredible. And I actually volunteered for her. So thanks to meeting her on the Masters, was able to go and do some volunteering behind the scenes. And I mean, she inspires so many people. It was very easy. It was very easily done. Yeah, I fell in love with collections, and it took a couple of years to get a job in a museum. I moved up to Edinburgh originally to work at the university, working on Bering Beetles. But I volunteered at National Museum of Scotland and was in the right place at the right time, full of enthusiasm, ready for when a job did come up.
That's awesome. Nice. Yeah, I really want to visit one someday.
We would so love to have you. It would be so great to nerd out in the collection together.
Totally. Yeah, so we have some comments and questions rolling in here. So let's take a look. A couple questions too about what we're talking about. Are we going to be talking about dung beetles also? Or are they in a sort of different category?
They're in a different category. There is some overlap. I can mention them for sure, but you know, they're second favorites. They're not top favorites of mine.
All right. All right. Oh, wow. Deanna, who studies the stars and the universe, said, I almost went into forensics because of Grissom. I'm not sure who that is, but maybe you know. Is that a character?
Yeah, Gil Grissom. He's the main character in one of the CSI series. So yeah, I'm sure he's influenced many people.
Nice. Cool. Thanks everyone for coming in and for the awards and things like that. And wait, there's a lot of comments. So I got a little lost here, but interesting.
Yeah, I'm always amazed how you juggle all of this, Isa.
Yeah. Yeah. So can you tell us a bit about the like the general biology of these beetles? And like someone above asked too, it was Andrew asked if you've ever been to a body farm.
Oh, not
Study
yet,
these.
Andrew. It's on my wish list. Yeah, I definitely want to head over to Tennessee to the body farm there at some point. That would be incredible. There's such crucial research that goes on there. It's really impressive. In the UK, we don't have a body farm. It's actually not legal at present. There are some hopes and some kind of campaigning to try and get one established here, but not at the moment. So for most research in the UK, people will use pigs as a good surrogate because they have very similar kind of skin, and like their gut flora and things is very similar. So they decompose in the same sort of way that human corpses do.
Yeah. And it sounds like you kind of made, well, I remember earlier you mentioned that you were using rabbits. Was that to attract carrion beetles?
Yeah, so again, that was like as a surrogate for a corpse. It actually worked out to be rabbits because we didn't get the piglets in time. But
Okay.
you can use any dead animals to attract carrion beetles. Some coleopterists like using rotting fish. Gets really, really stinky, so works quite nicely. You can use, you know, like just cuts of meat. You can use like liver, anything really that's going to be stinky and attractive to the beetles.
So I guess if I had a mouse in the house and I caught it, I guess I could use something like that too. Recycling.
Yeah, absolutely.
So question also, what do they do once they get the meat? Why do they like it so much? And also, how do they find it?
Yeah, good question. So as I mentioned, we split the family Sylphidae into two subfamilies. So you have the Necrophorines, which are the Bering Beetles, like you can see in this image here. And they are recognized from the other group because they have these distinct clubbed antennae. They often also have the ready orange markings on their wing cases as well. And then the other side of the family, they don't have clubbed antennae. They're kind of more like thread-like. And some are attracted to carrion and feed and breed on it, but they don't have any of the really special and well-known behaviors that the Bering beetles do. So the Necrophorous, of which there's about 70 species globally, they have the nickname Bering beetles because that indicates their behavior. They have this amazing life history whereby the parents will locate a small dead mouse or a dead bird, whatever the small carrion is, and they work together to bury it, hence the nickname. They do this because they've got like really good strong front tarsi, front legs, and big broad heads. So they kind of shovel and move the earth underneath the corpse and it kind of slowly sinks down. And then they cover it over. Then they prepare it. So you can kind of think of the corpse as being like a nest for their family. So they will strip the fur or feathers, depending on the animal. They will then kind of mush it into a ball shape. We've actually got a picture that we could drop in to show that one, Isa.
Sure. Once they find the dead animal, it takes some preparation. They prepare it for use.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's undertakers at work.
There we go. So this is kind of what a prepared mouse looks like. It doesn't look anything like a mouse anymore. So it's really this ball shape. And then what the parents also do, they'll coat this carcass in oral and anal secretions. And these secretions sound kind of gross, but they're really vital. They contain special properties, antimicrobial properties that actually slow down the decomposition. So they help preserve this like baby food for longer, which is amazing. And actually some brand new research from Steve Trumbo at the University of Connecticut that actually showed that these secretions not only act as a preservative, but they act as a deterrent as well. So they actually help repel competing Bering beetles, which is super cool. There's just so much going on in this just one little life history. So then they've prepared it, it's all ready to go. The beetles have mated, they lay eggs in a chamber near the corpse. And when the eggs hatch into larvae, they move up to the top of the corpse where the parents have made a crater, and they sit in this crater, and then the parents feed them. So the parents will feed on the rotting flesh and regurgitate to the offspring, which is so sweet, right?
Happy little family. And so what we're looking at right now, those are the babies, right? The offspring, the little larvae of the beetles.
It's adorable. Yeah. And actually these ones are like third instar. So they have 3 stages when they're larvae before they then move away and pupate. And for most species, the adults will feed the larvae in the first 2 instars. And then in the third instar, they may be able to self-feed. So they might be wandering around as these ones were here.
Gaining independence.
Yeah.
So Deanna asked what kind of carcass that is, and you said it was a rat or a mouse?
This was a mouse, yeah.
Okay. And then Andrew's asking, do they bury it for preservation purposes?
Yeah, it's actually more for the competition. So if you think of carrion, it's a very ephemeral resource, right? So it's only available for this one little period of time. And there's going to be lots of other animals that are interested in that resource. So you've got vertebrate scavengers like foxes, maybe like some birds of prey as well. But then you've got other insects. You've got your blowflies and other groups of flies that will be really interested in this disgusting dead resource. So the beetles have evolved this behavior of burying this food to kind of keep it for themselves. It's all about, the competition.
Mm-hmm. When an animal dies, all their nutrients are available to all these other organisms. And so, yeah.
It's really great because nothing goes to waste. And part of the forensic stuff that I was doing was like looking at the succession that happens when you have a dead body, a dead animal. You have, obviously your blowflies are really, really good at locating dead stuff, okay? So they usually are the first to arrive. The beetles sometimes are a little bit slower. So these adults will also predate on any fly eggs and larvae that are on the body to try and get rid of that competition. But in the later stages, if there's anything left of a carcass once these beetles and the blowflies have done what they need to with it, you'll have other beetles like domestids, so the hide beetles, skin beetles, that will come in and feed on the little bits that are left. And there's even some moths that come in at the really late stages as well. If there's any fur or feathers that are left on the body. So
Moth,
it's
you said?
a cycle of life. Yeah, moths. There's some tiny moths that come in.
And do they like, so what I'm thinking right now is moths, because moths, they need their food in liquid form to sip up their proboscis, which is like a straw. So is the carcass like kind of wet, or do they like release liquid onto it? Or do you know?
Yeah, it wouldn't be the adult moths. It's the larvae of these moths that would be feeding on the fur. So very much in the way that they're like a problem for collections. If you think about the fur and the feathers and things, like that's why we don't like some of a small number of moth species that we don't like in collections. Yeah, out in the wild, they would be feeding on fur and feathers.
Okay. Oh, like probably similar to clothes moths.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. Oh yeah, here we go. David Howden is saying Teniidae moths. So yeah, that's the clothes
one,
moth.
David. Thank you.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, fascinating. And it's definitely something that's really interesting to see how each species of animal like manages food resources. So you were saying here, Ashleigh, that they bury it to help keep the competition away and keep it for themselves, and they also secrete like oral and anal secretions that help slow down the breakdown of the food as well. And so I'm thinking of like other animals and insects that do things like here in the US we have what we call cicada killers, which are these large hornets. And the only reason that they're large is because they need to be able to carry a cicada that they are bringing to their nest to lay an egg on as food for their larvae. And they don't kill it in this case because once something's dead, it starts to decompose and go through those natural processes.
Yeah.
And so instead it just paralyzes it. So in that case, that's how they preserve their food. So it's another thing to think about. Yeah, how do you preserve your dead food? And I guess we humans, to even think about it that way too. Luckily, we have refrigerators for our dead meat that we consume.
So glad.
We don't add any secretions or anything. Sometimes maybe we do. Like when you cure things with citrus, for example, in a way. But anyway, typically we use the refrigerator. Oh, Andrew's saying leopards do that too, hide a body away from other carnivores.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you keep these beetles as pets, Ashleigh? Carrion beetles as pets in the summer?
Well, there is a story. I did one time bring a pair home, and I had a dead mouse, and a pair of Bering Beetles in my bedroom. I will say it was in an airtight box, and it was only for 2 days, and it was at the very beginning of the process.
Yeah.
Temporary. But no, they're not suitable to keep, not at home anyway, and we don't have the facilities at work to keep loads of them. But I had enough experience of keeping them when I worked at Edinburgh University. So for a year and a bit, I was responsible for looking after about 3,000 of these beetles, and wow. I think that's enough. I've reared enough of them now that I don't need to be keeping them regularly. But of course, I do try to breed interesting species in the UK that haven't been bred before. So actually we have the common species Necrophorous Vesperoides, and that one, there's several universities that are doing research into that and looking at this amazing parental care behavior and how it's evolved and all the wonderful things that happen within the family dynamic. But the other species that we have been proven to be quite tricky to breed. So I do try every time I find a pair, I will give it a go, but the success rate hasn't been very high so far.
Yeah, they seem rather complicated in their the way that they go about their life and all. There's so many like chemicals that they're in tune with, and like social relationships as well, and their families and things.
And some have even preferences down to the soil type. So you really have to get so many different variables right. Yeah.
So, David Howden saying, how many other broadcasts can feature oral anal secretions of an evening? So, yeah, entomology has it all. We talk about all the different things in entomology with the bugs and the way they interact. And it's a wonderful and interesting and wild world, insect world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I do want you to share with us, you have a book that came out recently, right, Ashleigh?
Yeah, I do. I put a big pile of books aside just for like show and tell.
Oh,
mine
great.
is one.
We love show and tell.
Yeah, so this was new this year. In January, it was finally published. It's something I was working on with my two colleagues for a while. So it was with Steve Lane and Colin Lucas, and Steve works on hysterids. So he led this publication, and he is the expert in the UK on hysterids. So they're clown beetles. And I kind of took responsibility for the sylphids, and Colin was the genius behind all the maps and dealing with all the records in this book, because it's one of these books that we term an atlas. These are really popular in the UK. I don't know how popular they are in North America, Isa, but it's kind of like a distribution atlas. So it's got lots of maps and pretty pictures that explain the distribution of the species in the UK. So this is a hysterid. But it's a different kind of atlas because we've actually included identification keys in here as well, and species accounts that contain all the existing knowledge for the UK species in terms of their ecology. And we've also included information on their conservation status as well, because they've recently gone through a review. So it's like all singing and dancing. Everything you want to know about clown beetles and carrion beetles in the UK, or in Britain and Ireland, it's in here. So
cool.
Yeah,
thanks.
It's really strange to finally. You know what this is like, but.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's drop the link in the chat too, in case anyone is interested in picking up a copy. David says, when I get these beetles in my moth traps, they often have mites on them.
Yeah, good point. These mites are phoretic mites. So they are. There's some debate on it, but generally the pool of thought is that they are beneficial. That at least it's a mutualistic relationship, right? So these mites, they'll hitch a lift on what I like to call the beetle bus, right? So they get a lift on the beetle, and they know that this beetle is heading to carrion, and they also want to go to carrion because they predate on fly eggs and larvae. So the thought is that these mites, once they reach the carrion with the beetle, they help eradicate some of that competition, because the flies may have already got to this carcass first. So that's the beneficial element. Great, they've got a helping hand, eradicate some of that competition, and they're not harming the beetle when they're hitching a lift. Though you can see some beetles sometimes that are really, really covered. Like you think that they must be really like weighed down physically by these mites. But there's been some research that's shown that these mites might have a detrimental effect. These have been based on lab studies, so we don't really know how it's playing out in the field, but it is possible that the mites will also predate on the beetle eggs. So it's a little bit of a grey area. It's not too clear cut. On the whole, we think that they're beneficial.
Cool. Hello, Yvonne. Welcome to the broadcast. And hello, Superb Dan over watching through Twitch. That's right. I'd love for you, Ashleigh, to tell us about this picture, the background of this picture.
This was such a special day.
Yeah.
Isa, you missed out on coming to this for some reason, but this was what was it, 2019? And we were both at the St. Louis ECN conference and ESA conference.
Yeah, the Entomological Society of America conferences and Entomological Collection Network conferences.
Thank you, Isa. So this is a huge meeting for entomologists. This is 3,000 or more entomologists getting together, sharing their research and their passion for entomology. It's a great networking opportunity, and for me, it was the first time that I came to a meeting in North America. Yeah, and the first time we met. So it was very exciting.
In person.
And if all of that wasn't exciting enough, joining ECN. The other really amazing thing that happened was we went to St. Louis Zoo, and St. Louis Zoo is exciting for me because they do a breeding program there for the American burying beetle. And I'm sure many of you have heard of the American burying beetle because it's one of the insects that gets a lot of attention in terms of conservation. And it's a really impressive burying beetle. It's much larger than the species that we have in the UK. But it's undergone massive declines. It's a species that used to be found across 35 states in the US, but it's now only found in 7. It was listed as critically endangered, but it has been down-listed recently, so it's, I think, threatened officially now. But St. Louis Zoo is one of the zoos that's doing one of these amazing reintroduction programs, so breeding cultures of this beetle in lab environments so that they can then boost the wild populations that remain. So I never thought I would get a chance to see an American burying beetle, and not only did I see one, I saw loads, and I got to hold one. So yeah, thank you to my friends that I was with who captured this moment so beautifully. I can't tell you how exciting it was. It was really special.
It was so perfect that the conferences were in St. Louis that year. And that was the year that you came over. Yeah.
Yeah, so. It was brilliant.
Yeah.
I got to go with Bob Anderson as well. Bob Anderson's a taxonomist. He works on weevils, but he started out on carrion beetles. And he'd written papers about the American burying beetle. And he'd never seen one, never held one as well. So I also have an equally dorky photo of him doing the exact same thing, which is amazing. It was great to share that moment with him too. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, I wish I was there to see the pure joy that came across. Oh yeah, Frank is saying also excellent bug pattern, and that is very true. Perhaps we can call them the Charlie Brown beetles as an aside. Additional alternative common name. Because it looks like Charlie Brown's sweater. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've never heard that one. It's good.
I don't know if anyone else has ever said that. But yeah.
One of the fun thing with our new book is that we thought up common names for species. So, I mean, there's a bit of debate. I don't know if you face discussion about this a lot, Isa, but there's a bit of debate about common names versus scientific names, and I'm in favor of them. I think that for science communication, for reaching as many people as possible, common names have a use, they have a purpose. So I was more than happy when my co-author suggested that we do this, that we do it. And we had some fun with it. So we've assigned some new common names for species that didn't have them already. And we also tweaked some of the existing ones.
I think it's helpful as well. Although it's tricky when it doesn't have a common name, and you hope that this can be the common name that people can pick up. But you know what I mean? If it's because common names are things that people just end up calling the animals. But yeah, it's definitely helpful for science communication. I'm going to share a screenshot of the book too, so that people can see what it looks like here on the screen, especially if they're not getting the link from.
And thank you so much, Frankman, for sharing a link there. My internet was struggling, so I couldn't manage to do that myself. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So here is what it looks like. I'll get rid of these other things too. Oops. There it is. And so that's the American Bering Beetle below, and then a hister beetle above.
Not the American Bering Beetle. So this publication does just focus on species in Britain Island. But,
okay.
It's very, very similar. So of the 70 species of Necrophorous, like most of them look very much like this. And the things that we use to tell them apart is sometimes the presence of hairs on various different parts of the body, the shape and patterning of the red markings on the wing cases, and then other really like small features. You have some lovely species in North America, not just the American Bering Beetle. One of my favorites is Necrophorous Tomentosis, and it's really, really covered in dense gold hairs on the pronotum, on its thorax. And there's even like old publications about it, because they thought that the dense yellow hairs on this meant that it was a bumblebee mimic, because when it would fly, when its wings are inverted, they're kind of orangey yellow on the underside, and because it was so fuzzy as well, they thought it was like a bumblebee mimic.
I remember reading about that. That was a somewhat recent paper. Like when I say recent, I'm saying like the last 10 years. That I think someone published on the fact that when it's flipped, you can see the other colors. Yeah, I've only come across the Carrion beetle once, and that was last summer. It randomly flew into the car. It wasn't even like I wasn't even looking at a dead body or dead animal, really. I've probably seen them more than that, but that was like the most like startling and not like where I'd expect one to be in my car. Moment.
What did you have in your car?
I don't know. I don't think there was anything dead in there. Yeah.
But they are really good flyers. I think that's something that surprises people. They're really strong flyers. But the thing is that most of them are nocturnal, so you wouldn't necessarily encounter them. And this is why we trap for them. This is why we put bait traps down to attract them, because otherwise monitoring for them can be pretty tricky. The other thing is that they're attracted to light. So if you run a moth trap, as David mentioned earlier, like you will potentially see these beetles. So we have about 7 species that are frequently attracted to light in the UK.
Cool. So we have a couple of comments about scientific names as well. With Yvonne saying, I agree with common names. Scientific names can be intimidating for non-scientific friends and family. And Oliver saying, an argument for scientific names is that it avoids confusion of species because of the different common names, and people know T-Rex, which is also a scientific name. So yeah, there's a lot of different.
Yeah.
Scientific names are definitely the anchor, and then it's
Absolutely
nice to have.
They're essential, and also they're international, right? So what is known as that species in one country is the same everywhere, and you can communicate with people of all nationalities about that one species, because you all know what you're talking about. Whereas, yeah, different locations have different common names, so it would get super confusing.
Totally. Yeah. Hi, Elias, over in Twitch. How's it going? Welcome to the broadcast. Yeah. And hello, Martin. How are you over in Manchester? Good to have you here today. Yeah. So what are What are some things that we can do to help support nature's undertakers or carrion beetles? How can they serve this important role of helping to basically, I mean, if you're thinking about it from like the human perspective, utilitarian view, like they help us get rid of dead bodies because they turn it into beetle, which is pretty magical when you think about it. Then they fly off as a beetle. um, so what can we do to help support their populations, Ashleigh?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and not one that I'm often asked, but I think through doing the recent book and myself just becoming more aware of their conservation needs, yeah, I think it's really important to get across that carrion is a limited resource, and unfortunately with a lot of our laws, like the way, you know, farm animals have to be dealt with when they die, like disposal practices, there's maybe not as many opportunities for carrion beetles and other carrion insects as there maybe once was. And I think also because society tends to be overly tidy, like this whole, like, you know, how we are with our gardens and our lawns and things. So when people find a dead animal, sometimes they report it and then ask for the animal to be cleared away. Or if maybe you found it in your garden, maybe some people would put that in the bin. And all those things are then restricting access for the carrion insects. You're taking away that resource. You're basically taking away their food. So if you do come across a dead mouse in your garden or something, sling it in the bush, put it in that back area of your garden, and don't worry about it. Obviously, if you've got small children or anything, make sure it's out of their way. But I would say just don't be overly tidy. The other thing is it's really important not to use rat poisons and things like that, because the resulting dead animal will then be toxic to the beetles too. Something to think about in terms of that. So those are the main things, really. Don't use pesticides, please.
Yeah, I feel like maybe with conservation and how to promote people to manage their lawn and stuff like that, we ought to adopt the Beatles song, Let It Be, Let It Be.
Yeah.
Let it be, let it be. Do it for the natural environment
Beetles.
and our beautiful planet and the Beatles. Let it be.
So you've got to release a single.
Woo! The next Bugsmas edition will be conserving the theme of conserving our insect friends, and yeah. Here, so David's also asking, although without standardized pronunciations, even scientific names are challenging in spoken communications. Yeah. And then what to do to conserve them. I'm going to just say a modified version of this out loud, but go on a spree to help provide them with food.
We don't need to go out of our way to do that. I think, you know, animals die naturally, right? This is just part of the circle of life, and this is a natural process that is normally occurring, that we're totally unaware of as well. And we should be so grateful to these insects and all the other carrion insects that play this vital role and clean up our environments. Something that Erica McAllister always says: if we didn't have blowflies and dung beetles and everything, you know, we would be wading through loads of dung and dead bodies. It would be horrific. So yeah, incredibly important, and we do need to place more value on them, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting too what you said about like leaving the dead, if you see a dead animal in your yard, leave it there sort of idea, because I'm making that relationship with that, and then thinking about what happens when like a plant or a tree dies in your yard. We do clean it right up. So when organisms pass away, with years of evolution and natural processes, like nature has found a way to deal and clean up on its own, and these beetles are part of that process. So yeah, definitely, if you can out there, leave a portion of as much of your yard wild as possible. Yeah.
And there are some other, so the other half of the family that I mentioned that don't have this burying behavior, and some of them aren't even true carrion beetles. Maybe if we drop this photo in, it's one of my absolute favorites. This one. Yeah, so we have some that are predatory, and these are also ones that are really beneficial to us and great if you're a gardener. This one here is what we call a common snail hunter. You can't see much of its ID features because obviously it's really stuck in there. This photo is from Maria Justamund. Thank you to her for allowing me to use it. It's one of my absolute favorites. So as you can see, it predates on snails. And it has a fantastic skinny head so that it can get right into the shell and feed on the animal within. But it also has an amazing technique whereby it's really similar to fireflies, glowworms, I think. Oliver, correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, right, I've seen the comment. Why are your beetles eating fireflies' food? Sorry. So yeah, they will bite the foot of the mollusk and release these digestive enzymes, and this will help break through the mucus, like defensive mucus that the snail will release, dissolve through that, and then eventually start dissolving the snail as well. So the beetle can then just use its skinny head, get right in the shell, and drink up all that yummy snail food. So they're great at reducing snail populations and just keeping things in balance.
Cool. Where are those ones found?
So these are found across Europe. It's a very widespread common species that we have here in the UK. And it does come in two colour forms, a red and black one. And there's also a subspecies, which might be a species within its own right. There's some work being done on that at present.
Cool. But here, wait, Molly's saying I have what is called armadillo bugs or pill bugs. They're gray beetles that eat dead vegetation but have really increased and are eating plants. Is there another insect I can attract my garden to eat them? I'm thinking of adopting a couple chickens to eat them, but I'm worried that they'll eat some of my beneficial insects too. You're in Pennsylvania, Molly, if I remember correctly. Why don't you send us a picture on Twitter? Send Ashley and I a picture of what you're seeing.
Yeah.
Hard to. Do you know what that might be, Ashley? Because I'm not sure what that might be.
Yeah, pill bugs. So we call them woodlice in the UK.
Oh, sorry. Okay, that's right. I do know what they are then. I thought that. Wait.
Actually, these invertebrates are one of the great examples of common names. So someone recently produced like a map of the UK and all the different common names used up and down the countries. Incredible to see the diversity. Like people have loads of funny names for this group of animals. So yeah, that just shows that example of how common names can be totally like regional.
Yeah. No, yeah. I know what you're talking about now. I think I processed it wrong in my brain. But yes, I call them roly-polies. I grew up calling them roly-polies.
Roly-polies, that's
Yeah.
a cute one. Very nice.
And I think that you don't have to worry about them because they mostly eat decaying vegetation and more like are a cleanup crew for plants, for plant vegetation. And actually, a lot of people keep them in their terrariums, or if they're keeping tarantulas or other invertebrates, because they help keep the terrarium tidy. So I don't think you have to worry about them.
They're the good guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Nirvan saying, wow, human interaction certainly has a ripple effect on the environment. Let it be, with two E's, pun intended. Yep. Yeah. Cool. All right. We're approaching an hour now, so guys, make sure you get your questions in about carrion beetles. Yeah. I hope that I find some when I'm in Borneo next year. I actually included a couple of photos here. I wanted to ask you if they're carrion beetles or something else. Did you see them,
Yeah.
the larvae?
Let's do this.
This one
Larvae. Ooh.
here. I have no idea. I didn't get any.
Oh yeah, that looks pretty Sylphid-like.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, the antenna I thought were really they're like forked at the end. So these are I think if I remember correctly off the top of my head, I think I got this off of I photographed this from the body of a dead orangutan in Indonesian Borneo.
Oh,
Yeah, a giant male
that's
orangutan had fallen dead from its nest, and we encountered it and went and I took a look at the different insects that were there, and this is one of them. Um,
yeah. So with Sylphid larvae, I actually have some at home with me at the moment. With work, we're in lockdown. We don't take collection specimens home, but I have my own research samples that aren't incorporated into the collection yet, so I am allowed to have them at home.
nice.
Yeah, it's cool. So as I mentioned, there's these two subfamilies. You have the burying beetles and then the other beetles that don't do the burying. And I'm sorting through this box right now, trying to find the right tube. I can't find the right tube. Oh, here we go. So the burying beetle larvae are very squishy. They're usually cream coloured, pale. I don't know how well this is going to show up.
Here, let me just make you bigger.
So this is generally what most of the burying beetle larvae look like. This is a Necrophorous Tomentosis third instar, so it's quite large. And you compare this with one of the sylphine larvae. I can find one. There we go. Which are dark and much more sclerotized. So they have a much tougher external cuticle. And that's because they're not underground. They don't have parents caring for them. They need to be much more robust so that they can kind of withstand being out and about whilst they search for food. So there's some larvae for you. So yours looks like a sylphine larva, Issa, if you want to pull the picture back up again.
Sure.
So it's more sclerotized. It's got that tough exoskeleton. It's got the general shape for a sylphid larva, for a sylphine larva. And it has the like kind of characteristic urogomphie at the end, which are these like tail-like structures sticking out.
What is it called? Urogomphie?
Yeah.
Is that different from cerci?
Yeah, and I'm not sure how or why.
Okay. Cool. And here's the underside photo too for funsies.
Oh wow! So you can really see here. Sometimes the sylphine larvae get confused with things like woodlice. So what do you call them? Roly-polies.
Yeah.
So carabid larvae can look quite similar as well. So cool. Yeah, once you get into identifying larvae, it's for a whole other different can of worms, I tell you.
Yeah. Here's one other larva. Oh, I didn't upload the other picture, I guess. I had one other larva picture, but I think it might be very different. Let me see if it's here. Oh no, I guess I didn't take a picture of it. I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess not. Okay, that's what I have for now. Cool. Thanks for taking a look.
No worries. Yeah, well, you'd have to send that to a proper expert for species identification on that one.
All right. So we have some questions rolling in here. And Oliver is saying you two should have a weekly talk show. Pure talent. Join us, Oliver.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah, you can have so David's asking, do the carrion beetles have specialist parasites? I mean, everything has parasitic Hymenoptera, it seems.
Do you know that I have not read anything to say that these beetles are parasitized by wasps in any way? I'd love someone to prove me wrong and tell me that there's some really cool research out there. Yeah, I don't think they are attacked by parasitoid wasps. There are some mites, that not the phoretic ones, much smaller. And again, I don't study and I don't identify the mites. That's way outside of my remit. But there are some of those that can be detrimental to the beetles.
Yeah. I wonder if the burying also helps protect them from parasitization as well, from being covered.
Yeah.
Not just their food is being covered and protected, but maybe it helps them as well.
Yeah. But when you think about wasps, though, I mean, there's some amazing ovipositors out there
That's
that are like
true.
inches long. So you would think that maybe if they really wanted to target the beetles, they could evolve some ovipositor that would reach down there, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's some of those wasps that bore into wood, and somehow they find their target in hardwood, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. So Frank here is asking, are carrion beetles doing their job alone, or do they have competition?
Yeah, so they do have competition. I touched on this earlier. So things like blowflies, houseflies, even flesh flies, all these things are going to be interested in this dead animal. So generally, these beetles don't want that competition, and that's why the Bering beetles have that behavior of concealing the carcass, and then the adults will predate on any of the rivals that are there. So they would rather do their job alone, and that's so that they've got as much resource as possible to try and rear their young and ensure that their brood is successful.
Thanks. Let's see, any other questions here that we missed?
Thanks so much for your comments.
Yeah, this is an awesome topic. It says, be awesome. So,
And I hope that none of you are having your lunch or dinner or any snacks in any way. So you probably knew from the title that there was going to be some element of death and gore.
Yeah, hopefully there was that warning, that an adequate warning for you all. Yeah, I have a question. Were carrion beetles around and cleaning up dead small dinosaurs back in the day? And also, I guess, how big of a prey do they take on? Like, if it's a big deer, would they come and just take what they need and go, like, deal with it? So it's kind of two questions. One question led me to think of the other question. Yeah. So, yeah.
Really good. And I always forget to say this fact. It's such a cool fact. So thanks for the prompt. The fossil record is really good for the Necrophorous, the Bering beetles. They've actually been found, or early relatives of our current species have been found as long as 165 million years ago. So yeah, in the mid-Jurassic, which does indicate that they were probably responsible for recycling early mammals and dinosaurs. It's pretty cool. So yeah, they've been doing this for a long time, and they are very successful. And your other question, remind me.
Oh, it was, how big of a prey? Like, does it matter the size of the prey?
Oh,
like,
yeah. So yeah, there's a bit of size variation across the species, but actually size can be dependent on how much resources the individual required as a larva, and then therefore how it developed. But generally, some of the larger species are capable of tackling slightly larger carrion. It doesn't mean that an American burying beetle can take down a horse. It's believed that the American burying beetle declined because of habitat fragmentation, but also potentially the loss of the passenger pigeon, which went extinct. So that's the kind of size corpse that ideally that species needs for development. But some of our species that we get in the UK are quite small. They're maybe kind of 5 to 7 millimeters are the smallest ones. Maybe that's a bit too small. I'm not checking my own book, but about a centimeter, I think. And then the variation goes up to maybe like 2 centimeters for the bigger ones. And you do see that our all black species will tackle slightly larger carrion than the really small one that will tend to go for mice and small birds. But that being said, you can find communal breeding when you've got a really big corpse. So if you've got a dead deer or something, you might find a few different pairs sharing that resource, and they will occasionally breed above ground if they have to, because they just can't bury something that's that big.
Okay.
So they can like partially bury, and they would obviously prefer to use the underside that was in contact with the soil. But it's always worth, if you are going to investigate some carrion that you find, with gloved hands, of course, turning the carcass over to see that the soil interface, what's going on there. Yeah.
I thought of some more questions too, and there's other questions rolling. We're really on a roll here with questions now. Are there? So first, I'll acknowledge the comment here. Be Awesome says beetles are awesome in every way. They have lived for millions of years. We need to add a Marvel character named Super Beetle Man or Super Beetle Woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I'm on board for that. So Oliver is asking, are they more diverse in colder or warmer climates?
Great question, Oliver. Yeah, they're more diverse in the cooler climates. That's because in the tropics, you think about carrion, it's going to decompose quicker in a warmer place. So it's even more ephemeral than in the cooler climates. And also the blowflies really dominate. So they are going to be the main players there. And also ants and dung beetles. Dung beetles, I mentioned there's some overlap. Well, dung beetles often become carrion beetles in some of the warmer places in the world. So yeah, less species diversity generally in warmer places.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. And then Frank, thinking of the dinosaur's scaly skin, for example, is asking which parts of the corpse can the beetles work through and what gets left behind?
It's great. They have amazingly strong mandibles. So when you think about it, they're like shaving off the fur and the feathers off the skin. They're chomping through the skin or the tissue or the muscle. And really the only thing that's left at the end is the bones and the fur and feathers. So in the labs, when we were breeding these beetles, just our most common species, we would use like a lab mouse, like ones that you can purchase from pet stores to feed reptiles. And I can't remember the weights of them, but just think standard size mouse, and you would get a brood of maybe like 30 beetle larvae on a small mouse. And so once they have all had their fill and have gone through those 3 instars, those 3 developmental stages, and then left and dispersed, really you just ended up with a box of soil with little bits of fur scattered throughout, and then maybe you could search through and find the bones, but really hungry beetles that don't leave an awful lot behind.
Nice. I wanted to ask, so with the ones where there's parental care, earlier you were saying that the first 2 instars are of some of the types of carrion beetles are cared for by their parents, by the mom and the dad, right? Which is pretty cool. Do they communicate?
Special.
Do the 2 generations, like, can they talk to each other somehow? Is it like mostly is there chemical communication or like sound communication between them, or vibrational, some sort of communication between them?
Yeah, there is. There's 2 things going on. So there is stridulation. The adults stridulate, and that's how they communicate with one another, and also the offspring. I did have a video which I failed to upload, didn't I? Oops. I think if I upload it now, it might crash my internet.
Is it online somewhere already? Maybe you can share the link in the chat. If not now, maybe later after the podcast, you can post it in the chat here for posterity.
We'll definitely do that. Thank you. So the parents have stridulation, and it sounds very squeaky. So if you disturb a carcass and there are active burying beetles in there, you may hear a squeak. So lots of insects can stridulate, and they have different ways of physically doing this. But for the burying beetles, they have what we call a stridulatory file. So on their abdomen, they have a little series of ridges. And then on the underside of their wing cases, they have some hairs. So what they do is that when, do this the right way, like they move their abdomen in and out past the wing cases. So the hairs brush past this file and create the squeaky noise. And then they have 3 forms of stridulation within this. So they've got courtship, so they're like signaling heat. They've got the parental, so they'll be calling the offspring, and this is because in the latest labeling ages when the larvae may be self-feeding, they've maybe wandered away from the parents, and the parents then
let me pause for one moment, because I think the connection got a little shaky for a moment.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. All right. It could have been my internet too, but I'm not always sure sometimes. Hello, Pixel over on Twitch. Thanks for joining us today.
No, okay. It's probably
can you go back 2 sentences?
Yeah. Of course. So we've got the 3 types of stridulation that the adults use. Firstly, they want to attract a mate, don't they? So they've got courtship stridulation to lure a partner in. And then they've got the parental stridulation. So in the late stages, when the larvae can self-feed, they might be wandering around the carcass. So the parents can then signal to the offspring that it's time to kind of come back, and they'll maybe feed them a bit more. And then they also have the defensive stridulation. So this is what you would probably hear if you disturbed a carcass. I don't speak burying beetle, so I can't differentiate these 3 forms of stridulation. But that's what the parents are doing. And then the offspring, they can't vocalize, they can't stridulate. So the way that they communicate with the parents is by tactile interactions. Larvae beg to secure more food from the parents. So it is very, very much like birds in a nest. So you can think of like the beetles as chicks, and they rear up and they touch the parents on the face, and that's how they do their begging.
Oh, adorable.
Yeah.
And how many siblings will there be?
Yeah, it depends on the size of the carcass. So the female will try to assess, like based on the size of it, how many eggs she should lay. So it really depends, but it could be between like 15 and 40. Yeah, it can be a lot.
That's cool. Yeah, that's pretty amazing how they can calculate and like choose how many eggs. That's really amazing to think about that ability.
But if they do end up with too many mouths to feed, or if the larvae beg too much, the parents will cull the offspring.
Wow. So
yeah. Brutal.
Like if they have too many eggs and there's not enough food, wow, it goes the other way. Okay. Pretty amazing. All right. Thanks so much for joining us. I think we'll wrap up the broadcast now. Is there unless there's something else, any last things you want us all to know about Carrion beetles? Or things, what are you looking forward to this year?
I'm looking forward to getting out and hopefully doing some more field work, because, I think we all missed out doing that last year. So, just hopefully seeing some more of these beetles out in the wild thing. And I'm really interested in the larvae, doing that really at the moment. So I'm trying to develop my own collection, hopefully produce a simple guide for the species that we have in the UK.
Cool.
For some of the later instars.
That's awesome, Ashleigh. Make sure you keep us posted about that. And
Thank you.
yeah, thanks for joining us. Thanks everyone for being here in the comments, and make sure you keep a lookout for carrion beetles around you and appreciate them, and leave any dead animals that you find in your yard or in the park or anywhere like that. Let them be. Leave them be.
Yeah. And also feel free to tag me in photos of carrion beetles that you find. Yeah, if you want them or you just want to share an appreciation, I'm all for.
That's right.
Find me on Twitter or Instagram, Ashleigh Whiffin.
Yes. Definitely recommend following Ash. She posts some really exciting things. Photos and moments, and her work in the collection as well, which we didn't even talk about your work in the collection. Whole other broadcast for that perhaps in the future. So yeah, thanks for joining. Actually, before we end, I'll put your Twitter here in the comments to make it really easy for people to find you, Ash.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. So here she is, everyone.
And also, what I'll do is I'll retweet the video with the Strategization because I couldn't pull it up just now. But there's a fantastic video by my friend John Richardson from the Beetle Lab. Definitely worth listening to hear that squeaky noise.
Yeah. Cool. Let me move this over. All right. Thanks everyone so much for joining. Take care and see you guys again soon. Bye everyone.
Thanks for having me, Isa.